why do you think Ayn Rand is such a controversial figure? Last time I spoke with you on this particular podcast, the amount of emails I've gotten, positive and negative, and certainly
Not
negative. I
surprised.
don't usually get negative emails.
Yeah, but with me you did.
Yeah, I can't relate.
Yeah.
I'm sure mine were all overwhelmingly positive.
It was mostly women sending pictures for me to forward to you
You
because
didn't send me any of that.
I can't. It's the
kept
wrong
them.
email address. I'm sorry. It kept bouncing. I was sending it to your.
Oh, so this is love.
Love hurts. Okay.
Yes,
But why do you think she's such a divisive figure? Why do you think she provokes such emotion in both the positive and the negative side? I'd love to hear both of your viewpoints on this.
Well, I think on the negative side, and both on the positive and the negative side, I think it's because she's radical. She's consistently radical. She upends the premises, the ideas that are prevalent in the culture that we're brought up on that are like, they're like milk and the basic stuff that we're growing up. You have to be altruistic. You have to live for other people. That's just basic stuff. Nobody challenges that. Nobody questions it. And if they do question it, they usually question it from the perspective of a cynic or a bad guy. Right, you mentioned the Joker, right? Before we started, right? That, I'm going to upend the world because I don't care about other people, right? So they're presented with these two alternatives, and it's real in people's lives, right? You either live for other people or you're an evil SOB, and most people are neither one of those, but the ethic is right here. It's living for other people, and when you challenge that, they have no way cognitively to go with that. And the only place they can go with that cognitively is to the Joker. It's to the evil guy. It's to somebody who wants to smash everything and destroy. Because they don't have this alternative conception of, oh no, you can be rationally self-interested. And that does not involve destruction. And that does not involve, exploiting other people. They can't conceptualize that. It's not in their framework. So it's the fact that she's so consistently on the side of self-interest, for example, on the side of capitalism, on the side of freedom. It's the fact that she dismisses faith to the extent that she does, or to the extent that I do, right? That alienates people because that is completely different from what they brought up. Now, the flip side of that is it's also really interesting to some people. So, you got some positives, right? And I got a lot of positives from that appearance. I know a lot of people came to my podcast because I appeared on your show. Why? Because they hear something that's completely fresh, new, different, they've never heard before. It appeals to something in them that maybe, a lot of people say I read Ayn Rand and it confirmed everything I believed. Now, for me, it didn't. It was the opposite. It turned upside down everything I believe. But there are a lot of people out there who have a sense that something's wrong in the world, that altruism is wrong, that socialism, that just the stuff and religion is wrong, but they don't have an alternative. It hasn't coalesced. And they listen to a lot of podcasts because they're trying to get ideas of what is it that I'm sensing that's wrong out there? And suddenly somebody comes out and gives them some clear explanation of things, and they go, wow, that's what I've been looking for my whole life. So that's the positive for people. And I read Ayn Rand. It just all made sense. It all clicked, and it made clear that everything I believed to that point was just wrong. It just didn't integrate. And I always knew to some extent it didn't integrate, but there was no alternative, so I believed it. What else was there? I remember saying to myself as a kid, probably 15, why is morality all about other people? Why is that? Well, that's just the way it is, right? And I couldn't come up with an explanation. She gave me the explanation, and she gave me the explanation why it's wrong to do that. And I think that's why people respond. It's just too radical. It can't fit into their cognitive framework that they're being brought up on, that they've been educated on, that just their whole life revolves around.
Michael, you don't bring up Ayn Rand that much in conversation, except as kind of references every once in a while as part of the humor of just the general flow in the music of the way you like to talk. Well, why do you think you don't integrate her into your philosophy when you're like explaining ideas and all those kinds of things? Like, why is she not a popular reference point for discussion of ideas?
Because I don't know if Yaron's going to agree with or can agree with me. I think for a certain percentage of the population, actually, I talked to someone from the Ayn Rand Institute. I forgot his name, older guy with glasses, and he didn't disagree with me. He said this is changing. I said I think for a certain percentage of the population who are uninformed about her work, higher than 10%, less than 50%. You mentioned Ayn Rand. They have been trained to think this is identical to Scientology. So as soon as her name comes up, it's like, okay, I'm out the door. I'm not going to have anything to do with this. And everyone who follows her is a crazy person. That's one thing that has happened. Another thing is Rand, in her personality, was very aggressive and antagonistic. She was, for a long time, the lone voice in the wilderness, being like, this isn't like, like one of her big adversaries in a certain sense was Milton Friedman. And she really hated how Milton Friedman was like, oh, having rent control is inefficient. And she's like, inefficient? We're talking about mass homelessness and people dying. And you're talking about this, like, what color tie goes with this color shirt? Are you And in fact, it's hilarious. There was an organization called the Foundation for Economic Education, FEE. Leonard Read was the head of this. And there were a series of letters. And she was helping him. She was much more philosophically grounded in certain contexts than he was. And there was an essay, a pamphlet that he published called Roofs or Ceilings. Yeah. It was co-written by Milton Friedman, later Nobel Prize winner, and George Stigler, also later Nobel Prize winner. Yeah. And basically, the argument was, well, if the government controls all housing, how's that going to work out? And she's sitting there, and she's typing in all caps. So she's holding on the shift key and doing this.
On a typewriter,
and being like, how? And you can imagine her with her cigarette holder, apoplectic, being like, how is an organization ostensibly devoted to free enterprise discussing this Stalinist idea in the most casual of terms? She's like, have I taught you nothing? And what's amazing is, so at FEE, they only have her letters, because she sent them to Read. The Ayn Rand Institute must have Leonard Read's letters.
Oh, we do, yeah.
I was able to, knowing Rand enough, predict exactly what the conversation would go like, because he also did something she didn't approve of, which is he asked other people for feedback on her work, and she goes, I gave this to you to read. Who are you shopping around to some jerk that I need their approval? What are you doing? Yeah. So it was a very interesting situation. But so that's one issue.
Now remember, this is Ayn Rand when she's young.
She wasn't that young.
Well, I mean, she's relatively young, right?
Yeah.
It's before Atlas Shrugged.
It was before Atlas Shrugged.
So it's before she's super famous, and before this is the Fountainhead's being published, but she's trying to work with others, and they're disappointing her left and right.
Yeah. So, and also when you are what she takes away from bad people is you have these kids, right? And you're going to sit down with them and they're going to be like, yeah, I'm going to take your guns. I'm going to lock you in your house. I'm going to take 60% of your income and all this other stuff. And they might, up to reading Rand, they might sit down and have a discussion. And Rand goes, hey, you know what? You don't even have to give them an answer. You could say, go to hell. We're not having this conversation. And you have no right to 1 second of my life. Mm-hmm. And this is not a legitimate opener. This is a declaration of war. This isn't like, it's not like if I sit down with Yaron, I'm like, hey, Yaron, here are my plans for your wife. Go to hell. Yeah. This isn't a conversation we're having. Oh, I'm going to make you unsafe in your house. What? This is not a discussion. So what happens is these people who 5 minutes ago were able to have a debate with this kid, because people read Rand when they're young often, and now that kid is like, yeah, I'm not even talking to you. It's her fault. Whereas in reality, it's that person's fault because that person had no right, although they've been trained to the contrary by our culture, to believe, yeah, I'm going to sit down and we're just going to equally have a discussion over Yaron's life, and you have one vote and I have one vote, and we're going to, and no, Lex has a vote, and that's just how it's going to be. Like, this is madness. And Rand's not having it. Yeah. So I think those are two issues. And there's some other things which I don't need to get into, but because one of the things that Rand said consistently in her life is that her philosophy is an integrated whole. Right? So to be an objectivist isn't just like, I like Atlas Shrugged. It means I accept objectivism as a totality. Since I do not, I think it is proper to be respectful to her wishes and not constantly be, especially given that I have somewhat of a platform, to be like Ayn Rand, Ayn Rand, Ayn Rand, because I don't think Ayn Rand would have liked it if I was talking about Ayn Rand this much.
So how do you deprogram because I don't like to bring up Ayn Rand just because I do see what like how people roll their eyes essentially. So how
What's
do
the upside?
what's the upside exactly? But what is that can you speak to that programming?
I think
that people have.
unprogramming people. I mean, look, at the end of the day, if you talk about the ideas and the ideas make sense and people are attracted to the ideas, then you say, oh, by the way, and this came from Ayn Rand, that's how you deprogram them, right? If you make the ideas prevalent in the culture, if people start viewing self-interest as something that's interesting and worthwhile and something worth investigating, and they said, oh, that came from Ayn Rand, then I think then we'll deprogram them and get them changing their minds about these things. And also, going on shows where people are going to watch your show no matter who you bring on, right? So even though now if you put you put Ayn Rand in the title, that immediately reduces the number of people who watch. So in the future you shouldn't.
You put Michael Malice in the title, and then at least the female population too.
The female absolutely
just to see.
That's right. But so you go and you try to make them as credible as possible to as many people as possible over time. It takes time. And ultimately, I don't think the culture will have this response to her. They might still disagree with her, but I think over time, and already you're seeing it, younger people, I think today, are far less. There was a generation who never read Ayn Rand and was like this, bring out the garlic and the crosses. We don't want to have anything to do with her. Then, and I think today, there are many more people who've read her and might disagree or not disagree, right? And then there are a lot of people who haven't read her, but who are not opposed to it, who are willing to engage. So I think it's changing already, and I think in 20 years it'll be completely different.
And just two more things that she does that I think it says that I think people find very, very off-putting given our culture. One is she will basically, you could sit down with Rand and be like, your fear is not in any way a hold on my freedom. Just that one sentence. And for a lot of people, that's very off-putting and very harsh. It's correct. Mm-hmm. But for them, it's just like, wait a minute, I'm still scared. It's like, I don't care. Like, for example, like with lockdowns and things like this. Yeah. It's like, well, I'm scared and maybe I have a right to be scared.
Gotcha.
Or like, I'm scared that you have a gun in your house. Yeah. And it's like, I respect that you're scared. I don't care. At the end, as you say, at the end of the day, this is my house. I'm going to live my life as I please, as long as I don't hurt other people. Well, you are hurting me because I'm scared. No, that's not.
This is the feeling versus facts.
Yeah. So that is one situation where
it's like a feeling versus freedom, essentially.
Yes, where Rand puts a lot of people off. I also think that historically, a lot of people who are drawn to her for the wrong reasons. That a lot of times, like Howard Rourke, the hero, we're going to still say hero. You're supposed to say protagonist, but hero. The hero of the Fountainhead, he's extremely intelligent, but he's also extremely uncompromising. What often ends up happening is you'll have a young kid who is somewhat intelligent, but then they pick up the personality, and now you're someone I can't work with. And then it's like, you're not Howard Rourke. Relax. You're not that skilled. You're not that talented. But because the character has to be a personification and have certain aspects together, when kids read that, might get the wrong idea, and that's not Rand's fault.
And it's more than that. It's so. I completely agree with that, but it's even broader than that. So here is in my view, one of the geniuses of the millennium presenting a philosophy, and she's got not just the questions. In my view, she's got the answers, and you're reading them at 16, and you're reading the answers. You don't know at 16 that this is true.
Yeah.
You might have a sense that it's true, but you don't have the life experience, the learned experience. You don't have the facts. You don't have the knowledge. You're picking up truth. It's just being absorbed. You're accepting it as true, but you don't know it's true. And then you go out into the world advocating for it, right? Which we all did, or at least I did when I was 16. And you're obnoxious. You can't prove what you're arguing for.
Yeah.
Because you don't have the experience. It took me, 10, 20 years, probably 20, to figure out that I really do think what she said was true, right? But I didn't know when I was 16. When I was 16, I just absorbed these ideas and accepted them in a sense, with some connection to reality, but in a sense on faith, right? At least presented it that way. And as a consequence, you come off as a detached from reality, obnoxious human being. And I think a lot of young objectivists are, and it's hard not to be. Because you're confronted with genius, and you're not a genius. I certainly am not a genius. And I'm confronted with just genius and have all this information in my head now. I can't articulate it. And it's hard to deal with yourself. What? There's an inside joke.
No,
here.
you said confront with genius. I point to us.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I'm confronted with you guys. I'm at an age where I know how to deal with geniuses.
But I'm gonna. There's something else. This is not why people don't like her, but there's something that the Fountainhead does, which I think is very. And I don't blame her, but it's a bad consequence. If you read the Fountainhead and you're young and you're intelligent and talented, the message, at least I got, and I know I'm not alone, is you are going to think that you're going to be a pariah, that a lot of people are going to be against you, and you're basically doomed for a short period of being isolated and alone. And that may have been the case when the Fountainhead was written. But I think now with the internet, and in my experience, both as a youth and someone who's a little bit older, I didn't appreciate, and you're not going to get it from that book, and you can't get it through that book because it has to have a certain narrative, how many people who are a little older are giddy when they find young talent.
Oh, yeah.
How inspiring it is, how exciting it is. Like when you talk to these kids who are doing things on the internet or writing or whatever achievement, you want them to flourish. You're not threatened by them as the antagonists of the Fountainhead are. And that doesn't come through in the Fountainhead because
it depends on your profession, right? I mean, for some parts of the world are better than others. If you're an artist, at least the way I conceive of art, and you want to go study art today, you're going to be poo-pooed and looked down on and so on. So yeah, I agree. I mean, and in my generation, when I read Ayn Rand, there was no internet. And I was in Israel, so we were isolated, and there was nobody else who had shared their ideas. And you did feel that kind of isolation. But Rourke gave you, to me, he didn't teach me about, you're going to be isolated, because partially it's because I wasn't. Maybe I was humble, right? I
thought you were Israeli.
When I read Atlas Shrugged, I identified with Eddie Willis.
Okay.
When I read The Fountainhead, I didn't identify with Howard Rourke.
How old were you read The Fountainhead?
So I read Atlas when I was 16. I probably read Fountainhead when I was 16 and a half, 17, something like that.
That is unforgivable crime. You read The Fountainhead after Atlas Shrugged?
Yeah.
If anyone listening to this,
they should read Fountainhead
first.
If
you read Fountainhead
for me,
after Atlas Shrugged,
no,
that is a war crime.
No, for me, reading Atlas Shrugged was much more important.
You're outnumbered.
It is more important,
What's that?
But my point is, I think The Fountainhead in many ways is redundant in certain aspects if you read Atlas Shrugged first. And because The Fountainhead is such a masterful book and such a personal book.
I agree with that. So ideally you would read The Fountainhead
That's
first.
what I'm saying, yes. And here's the other thing people don't appreciate. I'm sorry to interrupt you. People think Rand's always about politics. The Fountainhead is not a political book
at all.
It's about, she talks about politics in man's soul, sure. But it's about ethics, how important everyone has to have a moral code. That's the other thing why people find Rand off-putting. If you have young people who now find it very important to live a moral life, who are like, what does that mean to have morality, to have ethics, to live with integrity? For people who have gotten a little older, who have made these little sacrifices, who are like, I'm not going to fight at work. Do I really need to look for another job? Yeah, my wife's kind of, getting annoying, but am I going to make a fight about it? These little sacrifices that they make every day.
And big ones.
Oh, absolutely. So when you have someone who's forcing you to look in the mirror and say, those little sacrifices and big sacrifices you made, you did the wrong thing and you're evading that you betrayed your own conscience. That, to many people, I think, is very threatening.
But this is why so many people say that Ayn Rand is for 14-year-old boys.
Yeah, right.
Right? And there's a reason why it appeals to 14 is a little young, but 16, 18.
Yeah.
It's because those are the ages where we're still open to idealism in the positive sense, right? To beautiful things, to ideals, to seeking perfection, to seeking a great life. I think as you grow older, most people become cynical. They give up on their ideals. Why? Because their ideals were wrong and their ideas failed.
Yeah.
Right? My parents were socialists when they were young. Those ideas failed. So where do you go from socialism if your ideals fail?
Cynicism. Yeah.
To cynicism.
Which is horrible.
Right? All adults, almost all adults out there are cynical. And that is failed idealism. And when they look at the young people, they see their idealism. Oh, well, I was idealistic too. And they don't question the idea, well, they're good ideals and they're bad ideals. They're right ideals and they're wrong ideals. And that's why they attribute it to youth. So it's a threat to a lot of people. A lot of people who it's too late for. For some people, it's too late to change their minds. And they know it. And they're too invested in the job, in the wife, in the compromises.
In the comfort.
and they're too invested in the comfort, too invested in compromise, and too invested in comfort, and they know that they shouldn't be. They know they should change, and these young people are challenging that, and that is really, really scary for them, and that's why they reject it without too much consideration.
One of the things the working title for Fountainhead was Secondhand Lives, and Rand had two definitions of selfishness in that book. One is selfishness in the sense of my life is the most important thing. It's not the only important thing. My family would be number two. Friends, they certainly are extremely high values, but you can't have these secondary values without the first value.
But in the context of my life, right? Because your family might not be a value.
Right, you're
right? You might hate your parents.
Sure. The point being selfishness. Then there's the other kind of selfishness, which is Peter Keating, one of the villains of the book, which is he's selfish in that he's greedy. He's looking out for number one, but he has no values. He has no sense of character. He just wants to be wealthy. He wants to have a beautiful wife. He wants to have a big house. Why? He couldn't tell you. Because other people have it, and he wants to have it more than them. His sense of reference is other people. He's living secondhand. What the problem with that is, a lot of young people read Rand, and when they start arguing online, they just start trying to talk like Rand, whereas Rand would be like, be original, be an innovator. If you want to argue for objectivism and Rand's views, take her ideas, articulate them in your own way, because that's a good way of showing that you understand what she thinks. But what they end up doing is just talking like her. It sounds dated and comical, and that's going to be off-putting because it's like Rand wouldn't expect someone else to sound like Rand. She's her, her own person.
And she, of course, wouldn't view Keating as selfish in any sense because, or even greedy. Greed is a tricky word, but
he was selfish in the old school sense.
Yeah, he's selfish in the old, but even there, it's not as if he has some passion and he's going after that passion no matter what. I'm going to, light, cheat, steal. He doesn't have, his passion is painting, right? And he doesn't pursue his passion. He pursues what his mother wants him to pursue.
Right, yeah.
And he pursues money and
he's a status seeker,
completely second-handed in the sense that he follows other people's values, not his own.